Welcome to 18.1 Launch Week and our first webinar out of the gate, What's New in ASP.NET, MVC, and Bootstrap Controls, presented by DevExpress Web Program Manager Mehul with assistance from our CTO, Julian Bucknall. Don Wibier was supposed to be here, as you may know, but he is currently stuck somewhere over Eastern Europe, struggling to get home from Tomsk and their Dev Pro conference. So Julian has stepped up and will help Mehul out this morning. In this session, they will detail our newest products and features for ASP.NET WebForms, MVC, and Bootstrap. This session is being recorded, and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. You will also get an email with a link to the recording. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. We do have members of the dev team online with us, so they will try and get to all of your questions as best they can. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Mehul and Julian.
Thank you, Amanda. Welcome, everyone. And Julian, at the 11th hour, thank you very much, sir, for helping us out.
And welcome, everybody. It's good to be here. I'm just wondering whether I should put on a Dutch accent or not.
Where do we leave Don? What country is he in?
Yeah, he was in Siberia, and the conference finished, and he went to the airport, and apparently the incoming flight was 2 hours late, and he missed all his further connections. So, as far as we can guess, he's somewhere over Eastern Europe on his way to Zurich, but we shall see.
Well, you know what? We wish him the best. And you and I, Julian and Amanda, were just fresh back from Build last week, and we have our own bit of news this week, all our What's New webinars this week. So today specifically, we've got What's New in version 18.1, and Julie and I are going to cover all the web products related to classic ASP.NET, WebForms, MVC, and the Bootstrap line of controls that we have for Bootstrap WebForms and ASP.NET Core. And so the agenda is real simple. As usual in these What's New webinars, we'd like to show you the new features and the new controls so you can get an idea of how they might be useful for you and give you a chance to ask questions while we're doing this. So as Amanda mentioned, we've got our developers and support staff online, so feel free to ask at any time. And if there's any architectural or major future questions about product lines or so forth, we can also answer that towards the end. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm going to be covering WebForms and MVC and Bootstrap and ASP.NET Core, but that is not all the products that we have, right, Julian?
Absolutely. With ASP.NET, or if you like, our web products, we have not only the traditional side of things for .NET developers, but we also have our pure HTML5 JavaScript widgets, which we now call DevExpress. We're not going to be talking about those today because that's on Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday.
Yep.
You and me on Wednesday, in fact. Repeat performance.
Don't fly to Siberia in the meantime. No. So yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we did with these client-side controls is we created a new set of MVC controls where we wrapped our client-side controls. So we will talk about those on Wednesday. And if you're curious at all about the differences, we wrote a whole long blog post that explains the benefits and pros and cons and all that in the approaches and so forth. So today we're going to talk about some of our most popular web products, and to kick off this What's New week, What's New in 18.1, and that's the ASP.NET line of controls. And ASP.NET is a fantastic technology, and as you can see that Microsoft continues that tradition with ASP.NET Core, and so do we with these Bootstrap ASP.NET Core controls. And so today I'm going to use our demo center. So if you've got the 18.1 beta, which we released a couple of weeks ago, you've likely seen this demo center. And if you click this ASP, you'll see that it brings up the particular individual feature demos. And we also have these sample apps, what we call RWAs, real world applications. And all of the source code for all the demos is installed locally. All right, so let's just dive right into it. Now, in this release, Julian, we've got a theme that we started, and that is the Adaptivity theme. Now, Adaptivity for us has been something that we focused on for many releases. So why do we focus on adaptivity?
And adaptivity for us means essentially revamping the layout of our control to suit smaller screen sizes. It's not necessarily responsive, although adaptivity and responsiveness, they kind of come under the same cachet. For us, adaptivity means, for instance, if you're displaying a grid, we display less columns for a smaller screen and things like that. So we've done an awful lot of work, as Mehul says, over the past few releases for adaptivity. It takes a while to get right, let's put it like that. And with all these things, on the web, you don't know what kind of device your end user is going to be using. He may be a browser on a desktop like I'm looking at the moment on my secondary screen, or he may be on a tablet, or he may be on a phone. So the mobile aspects of web development are very, very important, and we recognize that. And so we've been doing a lot of work on making things responsive and adaptive as you view them on different size screens.
Thank you, Julian. And because the web is all about reach, you want to be able to provide the widest reach possible. And now that these mobile devices are outselling PCs and laptops, we know that your customers and your end users like you to support those mobile devices as well. So even though the classic controls are very feature rich, they're also very modern, as you can see that we provide support for mobile devices. So what's nice is you can see that over the years we've added a lot of support in many different ways, as Julian said, responsive and adaptive, and the differences between those and all that good stuff. But in this release, we've gone further by introducing some new features. And I'll start with the first one with the grid view controls, and that's specifically in performance enhancement, where we are using new internal algorithms for the adaptive mode in the grid view. So we already had the adaptive mode, but with this new internal algorithm, we've significantly improved the layout recalculation logic for both the ASP.NET WebForms and MVC grid view. And so what this means is now the grid view's client initialization is now up to 16 to 18 times faster when compared to previous versions. So just by upgrading to 18.1, your end users are going to find that these recalculation logic is not just smoother, it's smoother because we've improved it significantly. And what's nice is that we did this because we were adding some more adaptive features to other controls. So for example, you're going to see in a minute, we've added it to our image controls as well. So let's just dive right into that. So the first one is the image gallery. The image gallery now has a feature called adaptive layout that essentially keeps the control keeps a consistent look across all the devices. And it does this using something called breakpoints. Now, what are breakpoints, Julian?
The thing about breakpoints is, we all know what breakpoints are in a debugger, but with regard to web pages, a breakpoint is essentially a way in CSS, traditionally, to say if the screen is such and such a size, change these attributes to these values or something like that. So for a bigger screen, I can display everything I want, no problem. But as the screen gets, say, less than 1024 pixels, do this, change these attributes. And if the screen gets even smaller to say 512 pixels, do this, change these attributes. So these are known as breakpoints in CSS, and what we have here is we've taken that concept, if you like, and changed it to work with JavaScript and with our controls.
Absolutely, yeah. So the breakpoints is, as you mentioned, not from the debugger standpoint of view, but from the web perspective. It's a way to allow you to set those sizes. So we have improved the adaptive layout mode on the image gallery by introducing this adaptive layouts. And this feature allows you to define different settings for those different devices. And so you can use it by populating this breakpoints collection. So for example, if you take a look here, this breakpoints collection allows you to say, well, listen, for a medium-sized device, I want to use 4 items per row. Or on a small, only 3 items. or even a custom one where you define what the max width is, how many rows that entails. So it lets you get very granular and completely controlled. So if you want to have specific sizes for one type of phone versus another, like let's say Android versus iOS and so forth, you can do that. So what's really nice is because this recalculation is done on the client side, it's very smooth. It's exactly as you would expect it. You don't see it. You can see that when it resizes and rearranges, it does it very seamlessly and smoothly. And I recommend you try this on your own device. And if you ever see a QR code on our demo, this means you can actually run this locally on your mobile device just by scanning this QR code. And at this point, you might be tempted, aha, Mehul, I'm going to scan that QR code. I'm going to get in your demo. I wish you all the luck because unfortunately this is my local host. So please wait until we have published these demos on DevExpress.com, and those will definitely scale better than my local laptop here. All right. Now what's nice is there's a lot of code reuse that we do at DevExpress, and we've done that with these controls. Now, why is code reuse so important, Julian?
Duh. Write it once, use it in several places. And in fact, what's tended to happen over the years is that, we're providing the same controls across all of our platforms essentially. So we've really got into the habit, we've really got into the habit of writing, things like the engine, the layout type stuff once, and then, rendering it according to whatever platform we're using. So we'll see an awful lot of this as we go through the demos that Mehul is going to be doing. We're reusing the same code. Therefore, we can provide the same functionality across the board, if you like, at the same time.
Absolutely. And so that code reuse allowed us to say, well, listen, the data view and image slider and the card view controls, they have a similar set of layout. And so they can benefit from this new feature called adaptive layouts and also this functionality with breakpoints. So we have also introduced this concept to the adaptive layouts to the data view. And as you can see, you also have access to define breakpoints here as well, where you can say, depending on the size, how many items do you want per row? So if I didn't want 4 or 3, I can absolutely define that. And so, for example, as you can see, as I go to the larger screens or smaller screens, it adjusts seamlessly. And then once again, we did this. You can see it's not making another round trip to the server as I'm doing this. It's just completely doing this on the client side, so it can do it very seamlessly and smoothly. And as I mentioned, we've also added this feature to our other controls as well. Now, for the image slider, we've added a feature called virtual paging. Now, virtual paging allows you to work with a large amount of images. So if you've got a large amount of images on the server that you need to be able to show through the slider, well, what's nice is that you can do that. So initially it's going to load, let's say 30 items or so. And as I go through the right here, you can see past that 30, it's gonna go and load some more items. And we just added some information here contextually to tell you this. But you can see that what's nice is that if you have thousands of images items on the server, we're not going to load all of those, make the controls slow and your website slow. Instead, the virtual paging frees it up so that your control and your website is going to remain light and fast. All right, speaking of adaptivity, let's continue that theme with the form layout. Now, the form layout is an excellent control. It lets you data bind to a set of fields, and then it will, based on what those fields are, create a set of editors for you. Essentially, it'll create the form for you, let you edit it. It's a very powerful control. And with this release, we're introducing this adaptive layout mode. Now, form layout automatically adjusts based on the layout control size, right? But you can use this new feature to create adaptive web apps with ease. So for example, you can see I've got 1, 2, 3 column layout here, and country and city are spanning both the first 2 columns. So what happens if I start losing real estate? So keep an eye, obviously, on the columns, but also these captions that are on the left side. So as you can see, as I start resizing here, I've gone to a 2-column layout as my width got smaller. And as it gets smaller, the captions move to the top. And as we get even smaller, I go to a single column layout. And as you can see, the columns are wrapped. So the form layout does this all automatically, does it, as you can see on the client side, so it's nice and smooth. But regardless of what you're creating on, you don't have to worry, because this form layout not only creates the editors for you and creates the right editors. So for example, a new birthday was a date edit time, so it created a date time editor and so forth. And you can even add custom masks for, let's say, phone and stuff like that. So it's an excellent control, and with this adaptive grid layout, I think it just will make your life a lot easier, because you won't have to think twice. Now, you can completely control, as you expect from DevExpress controls, the customization to be able to say what those breakpoints are and how they should, for example, should it span, should it not, how many columns should it go across. All of that good stuff is available in the form layout control. All right, let's talk a little bit about ribbon scrolling. Now, ribbon scrolling is best shown with the spreadsheet control, which, as you can see, makes full use of the ribbon control. So the spreadsheet control here, as you can see, has a set of items here in the ribbon. And if I resize this, here, you can see that I've only got 5 items here, so I don't need any way to scroll this. But if I get smaller, what'll happen is you can see that now I am forced to scroll to the right. Now, previously, we didn't have a good way to do this, but we're now introducing this a way to scroll the ribbons using these buttons. And you can see they'll just pop right up for you. So that is now available in the ribbon, and any controls that use the ribbon, like the spreadsheet or the rich edit or the HTML editor, if you enable the ribbon with the HTML editor. Now, we've gone a little bit further than that, Julian, and we've actually introduced the ability to swipe. So let's take a look at this, and I'm using the what's this called, the F12 tools, and I'm using the responsive layout mode. But if you're using our tab control or page control on a mobile device, and this is what we're mimicking here with this little dot here, is the touch. Now, as you know, Julian, we support touch on all our ASP.NET controls. And so our ASP.NET controls that support touch can use, for example, a swipe feature on the tab control. So anywhere the tab control is used. And I mean, sometimes customers use this on the top bar to use it as a menu type of feature or navigation type of feature. All right, now the last bit of news with the adaptive layout is the card view. Now, the card view also has a similar layout, and as you can see here, it can benefit from the adaptive layout that we saw with the pager, with the data view and the image slider and so forth. And once again, you can see that we provide the breakpoints collection that lets you define how many cards to display depending on the device size as well. All right, Julian, let's now move on to the rich text editor. Now, the rich text editor is a big control, and typically it mimics what you see in Office Word, Microsoft Word, as does the spreadsheet control mimic Excel. Now, over the years, these controls have gotten a lot of features, and they're big controls. There's no two ways around it, because they provide a lot of functionality. They're going to be bigger controls, and that's one of the reasons we haven't been able to easily port them to, for example, our Bootstrap controls or maybe even client side, because there's a lot of functionality in this control. But we're looking into it. But what's nice about these controls is if you do need that full functionality of a Microsoft Word or a Microsoft Excel, then these controls provide that functionality for you. In fact, as I mentioned it before, in our demo center, we have these examples. So in the last major release, we actually included an upgraded version of this Office app viewer that highlights the power of these controls. So for example, you can see that you can build your own sort of Office 365 using these controls. And an example of this is available locally. So for example here, if I've got an invoice Excel file. So as you can see, this demo is really meant to show you, hey, listen, if you want to make your own version of this, it's completely possible. And you can, using our file manager, show off your list of files, or if you want to view the files or edit them, you can completely do that using these controls. Okay, so let's today talk more about the Rich Editor and how we've upgraded it. And specifically for this release, we're introducing a table of contents feature. So a table of contents, if you're not familiar, is as you know, like in a book, shows you what sections are available where. And in Microsoft Word, you can easily create a table of contents. And so we have provided a similar way to create not just a table of contents, but created an API that lets you use that functionality from the ribbon toolbar. And it includes not only a table of contents, but also a table of figures, a table of tables. And so in fact, if you've inserted a set of tables, and a table of equations, depending on what type of document you have. And what's really nice is with this toolbar, you can actually you can actually update that table of contents real easy. So for example, as you can see, I've got a heading here that's called, it was called introducing, but I rechanged it to introduction. And if I come back up here and I said, well, wait a minute, why isn't this updating? Well, I can simply click update table and it will update this table of contents to reflect any changes in the document. So if I move this section to a different page, it will automatically update that as well. So the Ribbon UI offers really that convenience to manage those interactive tables. All right, Julian, I hope you're sitting down because this next feature I think is right up your alley.
So yes, autocorrect. We all love autocorrect. You know, texting somebody and you send something entirely different than what you wanted to say.
Amen. Thank God for autocorrect, right? Well, what you'll be happy to know, and this is a slick feature, and it mimics a lot what we've got in Word, and it's takes out, how do I say, we're human beings, we make mistakes, and this autocorrect feature essentially says, listen, when you're typing something, so let's say I'm typing something like TH, lowercase e, and it says, well, wait a minute, in 99% chance you didn't mean to capitalize the H in THE. And so it's going to autocorrect that for you. Now, it's smart enough to know that if you were to type and say something like CA, it's going to say, well, you likely meant to type the state California, so I'm going to leave that one alone. But if I went further and I type California, if I type CALIFORNIA, it's going to say, well, maybe California is okay because maybe that's not the state. But if I went ahead and said, well, you know what, I'm going to put in CALIFORNIA, just the first two letters, it's going to say, no, you meant to type the state. And it says, listen, I kind of know better than you. So it's actually a really useful feature. I find 99% of the time it does not get in my way, and I welcome the changes before I start bugging Julian to help me make sure my blog post makes sense. All right, what's nice is we've also got this ability with autocorrect to do symbols. So for example, it recognizes that if I put in C here, that I meant to type a copyright symbol. So we're supporting some very common symbols like trademark, copyright, the usual suspects, as you would imagine. And we go further because we can actually use custom abbreviations. So for example, WNWD can expand to well-nourished, well-developed with hyphens. And you can even put in your own. So for example, here, please do not hesitate to contact blah, blah, blah. Rather than typing that every time, I can actually create that. And One that I really like is, let's say I want to type in my own logo. Well, I can do that as well, but just type in DX logo and have that expanded. And what's nice is it will auto detect URLs. So for example, if I type in DevExpress.com and hit space, it will see, oh, that's DevExpress, and it will recognize Julian, or it'll recognize emails as well. So for example, I want to type JM Bucknall at DevExpress.com. It will create an email link as well, so that you don't have to do that. And we've also added the ability to create bulleted list. So for example, if I come in here and type 1 and this and hit spacebar, not only will they create the indented bullet list, but I can go ahead and start typing that. As you can see, it will work that. And you can do this with regular bullets or numbered lists as well. So both are supported with autocorrect. Now, we've also added a feature. And Julian, how good is your Japanese?
Pretty bad. I mean, I can order sushi, but that's about it.
Then I'm going with you. We're gonna go omakase style, chef's choice. So my Japanese basically begins and ends there, basically. With roll, hand roll, and yeah, that's it. So what we've added is a feature called Input Method Editor, and Input Method Editor allows you to use the Latin keyboard, so your existing keyboards, to enter Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Tigrinya. So I'm going to mispronounce some of those. I apologize. Tigrinya symbols. And so those 4 major languages are supported because in the rich text editor, let's say your end user typing away, and there is a way you can switch using your current, QWERTY keyboard to say, let me switch over to Japanese and bring up this input method editor to put in, let's say, kanji characters or Chinese, Korean, or Tigrinya symbols that can be entered while I'm typing away in the rich text editor. And as you can see from this GIF image, it is now supported. And unfortunately, I don't have any other languages installed on my keyboard as of this moment, Julian. I got to work on that.
At least I have French.
Well, yes, but you speak French.
Because the accents, the accents. It's hard to do accents.
Bonjour.
Anyway.
There you go. See? And did you like that pronunciation? Bonjour.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Mm.
All right. Well, the last major news about the rich text editor and also the spreadsheet is the ability to scale. Now, this is a feature we introduced last year in 17.2, and this came back from customer feedback. And as I mentioned, these are larger controls. And so we found some of our customers were using these in a cloud environment or a web gardens or web farms, and we couldn't scale very well. And after investigating all the different customers' scenarios, we found that it was related to state. So we came up with a really ingenious solution that said, okay, well, rather than store state in RAM and trying to swap it out, we just said, look, we've got a better solution, and that is to make it stateless. And so what we did was, to make it stateless, we said, well, we're going to use external storage containers, and you can store state in SQL Server or even Redis or maybe even something else. And we took this time between 17.2 and 18.1 to work with those customers, and I'm happy to say, all those customers said, listen, this is a great solution and it solves those problems. So because it does this, and we've improved a couple of other minor features in this a scalability feature, I'm happy to say we are now taking it out of CTP for 18.1. And with this final release, not only do we support Azure, now with 18.1, we're also supporting Amazon Web Services. And Amazon Web Services, we didn't target it first, even though it's probably the leader in cloud right now, and Azure with a close second. A lot of our customers were using Azure, so we targeted Azure first, but I'm happy to say we support AWS as well. All right, moving on, let's talk about the spreadsheet control. Now, the spreadsheet control has a new mode, Julian, and it is called the reading view mode. Now, I know late at night, Julian, you're looking at your detailed expenses report, and you're like,
Yep.
I don't need a cluttered toolbar. I just want to see, all the money that I'm blowing on web hosting cost with my different domains around the world. Well, I'm happy to say, Julian, you can easily do that now because this new reading mode not only gives you a lighter toolbar that's less cluttered, which means that it's also going to render quicker, but it also means that reading view mode prevents you from modifying the document. So this is simply to lay back and enjoy the Excel as one does, right? I mean, that's exactly what I do at 9. Get a nice glass of wine, roll up with Excel in reading view mode. But no, seriously.
Absolutely.
No, listen, there's plenty of customers in the enterprise that don't need to be able to, because, in some roles you have a customer or a client that you will put them in reading view mode because you don't want them to be able to edit. So it has many uses. And of course, we do provide you to easily find a way back into editing view by simply clicking editing view, and it will take you back into the full view as well. And so you can easily switch between the two, and it makes life easy. And of course, we still give you access to some common things like find and print, which you may still need to do from the spreadsheet. Now, we've also enhanced the API of the spreadsheet control. And Julian, this actually came from a lot of customer feedback. And they told us different things. Some customers were like, we need to figure out when somebody is clicking on a cell, or we need to figure out when they've gone beyond the cell, or when they're trying to change the editor cell text and I've not allowed it, or something like that. And so we investigated all these scenarios, and we figured out that the best way to help these customers was to provide a set of events so they can hook in and see exactly when this is happening. So not only does this solve a lot of customer scenarios, but we're able to enable a new scenario that lets you do custom in-place editor. So for example, here in this date field, you can see I've got a custom in-place editor. So as you can see, I'm using our calendar control here to edit the dates here. And so you can even see exactly how we do this, and how we subscribe and using the events with our custom control. So as you can see, I've got a date edit control, and that we're hooking in to our spreadsheet to use for that custom item. And you can see when the cell begin edits, our on spreadsheet cell begin edit custom lets us hook into that specific event and enable these type of scenarios. And I know a lot of customers will be happy because they were looking for extending our spreadsheet. Now, and I'm happy to say the spreadsheet is really growing with the customers where they want to enable scenarios like these. It makes me happy to see this being used. All right, so keep that feedback coming, guys. All right, let's move on to the scheduler control. Now, Julian, this next feature is really kind of unusual because you're going to say, what? And that is, we've enabled a way to use the scheduler without actually using the scheduler.
Yep, I'm all for that. I want a diary where I don't have to use my diary for sure. Yeah.
Dear online diary.
Yes.
So absolutely. It sounds really unusual, but the reason we did this, again, is from customer feedback. And that's because we had some customers who said, we need a way to allow our end users to create appointments, but we don't actually need to display a scheduler. And so that's what we've got here. In this demo, I've got what we call our new standalone control. It's a storage control. It's the HPX scheduler storage control. It's a non-visual component that implements all the scheduler-based data operations. And you can now do that using third-party web controls like our button and our grid view. So when I click this button, I've added a new appointment to the grid view. Now, I'm not actually adding it to the grid view. It goes into the storage controller. The grid view is simply binding to the storage controller. And then I'm using a hint control to say, oh, listen, I'm going to snooze it here for another 10 seconds. And so the hint control is working with the scheduler storage control to say, oh, when is the hint due? When do I display it? And it helps you do that. And now I've got a very lightweight view that lets me work with scheduler information without actually having the scheduler on the page. So it's a very powerful way to use that. And what's nice is, as you can see, in our initial load here, we're binding the grid view to get appointments. And if you look at the get appointments, it's simply looping through the storage controller, this storage control for the scheduler, and let us get those appointments out. And so you have all of that data, scheduler data operations available to you. Now, we've also added date highlighting in the date navigator. So if you take a look, the date navigator can let you see easily when you have appointments. So for example, I've got 2 appointments today. So if I switch over to another date view, you can see I'm using what we call the highlight mode called labels to say, oh, you've got anywhere from 1, 2, 3 or more. So if you see 3 here, it could indicate 3 or more. So for example, I've got 4 here, but it wouldn't make sense to add 4 dots because then they would just be smaller and smaller dots. So we've said with the labels that I've got any number of appointments. Now, labels aren't the only way you can show this. You can also use bold, and bold is a sort of a less cluttered way to say, if it's bolded, then I know I have an appointment there. Or you can also use custom, where, for example, here I'm using underline, and this way you can completely control how the date navigator displays that. Now, we've also enhanced the resource navigator. This resource navigator is really slick in that it lets you see what your appointments are by resource and lets you filter them as well. So this resource navigator here tells me I've got 3 or more resources. In fact, I've got 6, and I can control what I see them. I can easily filter this out by saying, let me only see the one for stew. And so I can get that, and I can also use this filter button to granularly control each items, or in fact, bring them all back. And what's nice is I can use the resource navigator in 2 modes. In token mode, you can see it's like our tag box control. I've got these tokens to display them, and as you can see, I can add or remove them easily. And I've also got pager mode. And pager mode can be useful because I can page through them, or I can simply click on this combo box and say, all right, let me switch over and highlight and jump to another one. So you may prefer the token or you may prefer the pager. What's nice is the Resource Navigator lets you work with both modes. All right, Julian, this next one is about charts, and I'm just going to take a mea culpa because you and Paul, I believe, are going to be diving into these topics in the charting webinar.
And again, this boils down to code reuse across all of our products. We have a charting team and they deal with all the platforms. And so what Mehul is going to be quickly describing here, we're actually going to be showing off within our webinar tomorrow, which is WinForms and WPF. So it's all about, selecting points and having crosshairs and having the crosshairs update easily and all the rest of it.
Exactly. And if you are interested in our what's new, if you click on this ASP.NET and you scroll down, there's chart. There's links to these blog posts written by my colleague Oliver, where he talks about the data aggregation improvements. But again, if you want to see this in action, definitely join Julian's webinars on charting. So so they'll cover the new cross-line hair mode, because there's a lot more to cover in this webinar. So let's move on, and I will jump into editors. Now, for the editors, we've got 3 specific editors that benefit from 2 enhancements. The first is custom filtering. Now, we've now enabled multi-column search for the combo box. And not just the combo box. What I'm going to talk about next is for the combo box, list box, and tag box. Token box. And so all 3 of those controls benefit from custom filtering using multi-column search and umlaut insensitive search. And again, this came from customer feedback. So for example here, let's say I want to search for Eastern in the company name. Well, I can start typing and you can see it starts to filter that. But what if I'm looking for United Kingdom in the second column? I can simply start typing that as well, and we'll find it in both columns. And that's multi-column search. But what about I'm looking for Munchen or Köln, and I apologize, I know I'm totally butchering the names here, but let's say I want to type and find MU. Well, I can do that easily by just typing MU, and it's not going to worry if I typed it as a umlaut. And that's what umlaut insensitive allows your customers to now easily do. They don't have to worry about putting in the special umlaut version of that character, and the U will match on that as well. So for example, do we have any other umlauts? No, but you can see that if I type in KO, it will find that as well. Now, this next feature is a non-visual feature in that we didn't add a specific enhancement. It's a performance enhancement that came from customer feedback. And what this was, we had several customers who were using a combo box with not, let's say, 20 items, but sometimes 100, sometimes 500, sometimes 5,000, and sometimes a lot more than that. And as you can imagine, the combo box with several items, and we do support, filtering a large data source. But what we found was some customers, when they were using it with large number of items and they had several combo boxes or several list boxes or several token boxes on one page, what happened was it caused the page to become very slow. So we found a way to not just render them, but also filter them in a way that they're done on the client side, and it significantly enhances the performance of the list box, the combo box, and the token box. Now, the best way to show this is I'm going to show you some numbers, and let's bring up the notepad file I've got here. So I'll do a blog post on this very, very soon, but here you can see we've got a list box. The initialization time with 5,000 items used to take around 1 second, and we've got it down to nearly a tenth of that, down to 130 milliseconds. Now, it gets even better. If I've got 50,000 items, then what would take something like 8 seconds is down to less than a second. Now, sometimes some customers were doing something with like 500,000 items, and that would just cause them out of memory exception. It wouldn't even load the list box. Well, we've got it down to like 7 or 8 seconds. And again, it's even better for the combo box with filtering. So I'll do a blog post on this, but what's nice is upgrading to 18.1 gives you these benefits. Now, and of course, with each release, we do other things as well. For example, we've got some enhancements for security, and we'll do that in a separate email that we'll talk about. So let's move on to the tree list. Now, if you're familiar with batch editing in our ASP.NET Grid view, I'm happy to say it's available in the tree list as well. And in the same way, you can just click on a cell, get right into it if you use the start edit action as focus, or you can do double click or click in the same way that you do with the grid view. So I won't get too much into that. It's a very familiar feature, and it's a very nice feature as well. And what's nice about batch editing is, for example, it lets us batch the items. So you can see here, the 2 cells that I'm editing here are marked and says, listen, you haven't committed these yet. If you want to commit, then hit update or cancel all those changes as well. So really nice feature with batch edit. So with that, Julian, let's jump into quickly our Bootstrap controls. Now, why do we make these Bootstrap controls, Julian?
Well, the thing about Bootstrap is, in essence, it's very, very well supported out in the community. You can buy themes for Bootstrap pretty much all over the place, or download open source ones or whatever. It just makes it very easy for us, if we did support Bootstrap, to actually support a whole bunch of themes and look and feel and all that kind of stuff. So we've done a lot of work with regard to supporting Bootstrap, and it just makes things a lot easier, to be brutal.
Agreed. And it's a huge ecosystem out there. In fact, if you know people who are using Bootstrap, tell them about these excellent new Bootstrap controls. And as you know, we started with the idea was to create a set of controls that mimic what we've got in classic ASP. Now, I call them classic, because they've been around the longest, but as you see, we keep them fresh, up to date, performant. And the idea with the Bootstrap controls was to say, rather than use the theme engine that we typically use here, and we've got these excellent themes, we couldn't find a good way to say, well, listen, these can work in Bootstrap, but they don't work exactly the same way a Bootstrap theme might look or feel. So rather than trying to redo these controls for Bootstrap, our classic controls, we said we'll just make a new set of controls because it makes more sense, and rather than trying to introduce breaking changes into these other controls. So these controls have similar set of features, similar set of API, but they're completely different theming wise because they build off of the Bootstrap framework and the Bootstrap themes. They don't use any of our theming approaches. So what's nice is every time Bootstrap releases a new framework, we keep up to date with it as well. So these now support Bootstrap 4, and with it, those new themes for Bootstrap 4, even these funky themes like Sketchy here, right? You might say, yes, exactly.
Hey, oh man, you've really got to want to see that.
Hey, if you're into like wanting to show a mock-up and say, hey, this is sort of like a mock-up, right? But we've got these beautiful themes like Material UI here as well. So what's nice is I'm not gonna go into every new feature that we have for it, but I'm gonna go into the relevant ones. So for example, in the grid view, we also have the adaptivity feature that you saw in the other controls. And what's nice is you can see the adaptive feature works great. But one of the big difference with adaptive features in the Bootstrap controls is we don't have that breakpoints collection. Why? Well, because Bootstrap has its own layout engine that uses things like call span Excel and so forth. And so this is a Bootstrap a way of doing things. So we're not going to recreate or provide something like breakpoints that doesn't naturally exist in ASP.NET or the base ASP.NET framework. And so you want to build off of Bootstrap. And so this is going to be one of the key differences between the Bootstrap controls and the classic controls. But you will see is that it works in a similar way. That's the nice thing. And so when you've got those base things set in your Bootstrap file, we will build off of that. And the control, as you can see, the rendering is a little bit cleaner because you don't have to worry about that. So here, as you can see, with the form layout that's used in the edit mode of the grid view can provide that similar feature that if it doesn't have enough real estate, it will automatically go to a single column. When it has enough, it'll go to multiple columns, etc., etc. Now, what's new for the Bootstrap controls in in version 18.1 is we've now added the scheduler controls. So the scheduler control now lets you see a beautiful scheduler using some really nice themes for Bootstrap as well. So, and whatever Bootstrap theme you use out there, we don't care. Just bring in your SAS file, your LESS files, and all the Bootstrap CSS and so forth, and we will automatically update to it. We simply used these as a guide because one, these are available for free, but and I believe Don has a webinar where he shows how you can take a Bootstrap theme, maybe a paid theme, and adapt it to use, not even adapt it, just bring it in and our controls will automatically use that theme. And again, the scheduler looks really fantastic in Bootstrap. In fact, if I was starting a new project today with ASP.NET, WebForms or MVC, I would consider, WebForms or ASP.NET Core, then I would consider using our Bootstrap controls. These are fantastic. And one of the things that we did with our Bootstrap controls is when we decided to use charts, we didn't bring in our classic ASP.NET charts. We brought in our DevExpress charts, and those are using SVG, and they render, and they've got these client-side animations and all that good stuff. And what's nice about that is that you can easily see that they've got some really nice features like those animations, but they've got a very nice rendering. They're rendered on the client side, so they work across any of the major browsers that support SVG. And new for 18.1 is we brought in the Sparkline from DevExpress as well. So the Sparkline widget was new in 17.2 for DevExpress, and now in 18.1 we brought it over as a Bootstrap control for ASP.NET WebForms and also ASP.NET Core. So that's the second thing I want to talk about, and that is that we have a set of we have a set of ASP.NET Core controls, because we know ASP.NET WebForms does not work in ASP.NET Core. So for ASP.NET Core, we also have a similar set of controls as the WebForms controls and a similar set of features. So of course we have got the grid view, card view, and now scheduler in 18.1, and also the Spark line, and a set of new features as well. So for example, the menu provides a new mode that you can use in 18.1, and that's the pop-up mode that lets you right click and show a pop-up, and you can see it works very seamlessly. And also a nav bar mode, so when you need this hamburger menu, when you have enough real estate, it'll show the nav bar, and when you don't, it'll show this item. And again, these are similar features to what we already have in existing controls, so I won't go into detail about every single one of them. You can experience these for yourself, but I highly recommend that you take a look, because there are some really interesting features. For example, in the grid view, we've added merged groups, and merged groups allows you to see the groups merged up at the top and see what is exactly done. So for example, I can bring company name up here as well and decide if it's sorted ascending or descending and so forth. And that is provided. Of course, this is a feature we've had in the classic controls, but with each release, and as customers give this feedback, they said, hey, we love the Bootstrap controls. We'd love to see this feature come across. Tell us what you'd like, and also show us. I always love to see. I mean, one of the things, Julian, this past conference at Build, we had such great conversations with the customers, right?
Exactly. People will come up to us and say, we really like this, or we don't like that, and could you show us this and that? And it's just great to be able to hear from customers like yourselves what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you don't like, what you do like. That kind of feedback is invaluable for us to actually plan out our next major release. Yes, we have some ideas about what we want to do, but we do need extra feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not a consulting company, but we're also not deaf. We listen to our customers. We really appreciate your feedback, because we know if the one customer is talking to us about it, there's likely 10 other customers who haven't told us the same thing, but would like a similar feature, or would like us to port a certain control and bring it to a certain framework. So let us know. And one last thing I'll say about the ASP.NET Core Bootstrap controls, and I've blogged about this, is we've made some enhancements to the client API. We've got camel case support now, or as they call it, lower camel case. Upper camel case would just be the first letter, but lower camel case, at least to me and Julian, it makes more sense to go lower camel case. But we've added some improvements to event handling, introduced some new functions. So definitely take a look. And we've got support for JavaScript promises there as well. And lots of goodness in this 18.1 release, not just for the classic controls, but for the Bootstrap controls as well. So with that, Julian, I'm going to say, we've got a little bit of time, I think, for a Q&A. And I'm going to leave this question to you. So if you've got questions for when is it available, Julian, I'm going to punt that to you.
So in theory, it's going to be available this week. We are doing our final bits of testing on the installer and on the product itself. So it should be, quote, unquote, any day now, but don't quote me.
Awesome. All right. And here's our contact info. And Julian, you're looking like a guy from Netherlands more and more every day.
So unfortunately we prepared the slide deck early. So I'm Julian B at DevExpress.com, and you can also see me on Twitter with @JMBucknall.
Julian B at DevExpress. All right, so I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions. Somebody asked about parity. I mean, it's our goal to be as close to the controls feature-wise and so forth, but it's not easy, because we have to pick and choose our battles. So some releases, we have more aggressive plans for what we like to show and what we like to produce. So for example, you can see there is no pivot grid here yet. There is no, certain things are missing, and doesn't mean that we'll always bring them, because some things don't make sense. Some things don't make sense in ASP.NET Core, so we can't port them over. For example, at the beginning of this webinar, I mentioned that reporting, it has some web features, and Julian, and I think, and Paul are going to be doing that with the dashboards later. So you're going to be hearing about our ASP.NET Core support from reporting, and as well as our dashboard ASP.NET Core support. But what's missing from there is the ability to export. Why? Because fonts that exist on Windows don't exist on Linux, and we can't distribute them, right? We don't have that kind of right. We don't have that kind of money to say, let's just give a free license for Arial to everybody in the world, right? So we can't easily do certain things because it's a limitation of the platform. So when it makes sense, we will absolutely do it, and we'll do it, try to do it in the best possible way, in the way you've come to trust us. So yeah, definitely trust that we're thinking about these complex problems in a way that would make useful sense for you and your customers. And so it doesn't mean we'll never have export, but maybe we'll figure out a way to export where maybe, if we can find complementary fonts, great. Or, maybe export only to PDF or something like that. So we'll see. We'll see what's possible, what's not possible, and bring it for you. So somebody's asking, often tablets use a different layout by putting a sidebar for navigation. Again, the control is doing that adaptivity feature, right? This is just a control adding it. If you've got other things on the page, fair enough, right? The control is going to adapt based on what the container it has. So if the container says, oh, I only have X amount of space, great. But I recommend to you that if you're building a view with the card view, data view, and so forth, just detect if you're running on mobile, show them that mobile specific page, because why would you want to have extra things on there, right? For mobile, you really want to consider how much space do you have and what's the least amount of things you can put on a page to display that. And yes, somebody asked, breakpoint equals media query. In essence, yes. Was there, Amanda, any big questions about, products in terms of like, hey, are you going to have so-and-so control?
Well, I do have a question, which I think you can address, about upgrading. How do they upgrade from 17.2?
What a great question. Thanks for asking, Amanda. And yes, I'm bringing up Visual Studio right now, and that's because when you install our installation, pardon the pun, there is also a project converter installed. So this project converter, its main job, and we like to keep it simple just to do this one job, is to update project references. That's it. We want to keep it simple because, we don't want to change around your code and so forth. What's nice is typically if you open a previous example, I think I haven't upgraded this one, right? Oh, actually it's gone. But anyways, if I had an example here that was created with a previous version, then what the project converter will likely come up and say, hey, I see this was created with a previous version of DevExpress. Do you want me to upgrade it to the newer version that you have installed? And you can do that. Or you can manually bring it up from the DevExpress menu and go to Project Converter and say, hey, I want to upgrade so-and-so project, and it will run through and upgrade the project references for you. So it looks something like this. You point it to your repo or your project, and then just hit upgrade all, and it will upgrade and give you a list of what has been upgraded, what hasn't, all that good stuff, and gives you granular control to say, create some backup files or don't, process the read-only files as well, all that good stuff. So definitely use that project converter to manage that. And if there's other questions, let me know, Amanda. But in the meantime, let me see if I can. Somebody was asking about, we don't have a Gantt chart. People have asked us, but we don't have a Gantt specific chart in the classic chart controls for ASP.NET. Okay, do the Bootstrap chart controls include the dashboard builder feature? No, they do not, Dan. I apologize. For dashboard, the dashboard controls use our client-side DevExtreme controls. So they are actually built with our client-side controls, and the dashboard has its own designer. I believe Paul and Julian last week did an excellent webinar that you can find on our webinars page, but the web version of our dashboard is already using the DevExtreme client-side controls. And so it's unlikely we're going to recreate that with our Bootstrap controls as well. But if you want to create Bootstrap controls with them, if you want to create a dashboard, you can do that. It just won't be with our dashboard designer. You will have to manually figure out what chart goes where and so forth. Now, if you've seen our online demos, and I'm going to bring this demos page up, you can see that under ASP.NET, we have several what we call real-world applications. So if you look at this, for example, Sales Viewer demo here, this was created using our ASP.NET controls, and it shows off how to create a dashboard using separate controls. And this is not using our dashboard control. This is just simply our controls laid out dashboard style. So it's completely possible. And I recommend you take a look at these demos, and you can see exactly how we built them. We've got them even for other platforms, for the client-side platforms as well as WebForms and so forth. Okay, I'm going to take a quick look to see, Amanda, if there's any other questions. But if I've missed any questions, guys, let me put this slide back up. I am happy, as is Julian and anybody here at DevExpress, to speak with you. And if you want to, have a deeper, longer conversation, hey, I like talking on the phone these days. I'm not against, I'm not one of these guys who's like, just text me. No. I'm happy to speak with you. If you want to share any feedback, have any questions, I'd love to discuss it with you. Follow us on Twitter and all that good stuff. So with that, Amanda, I will head it back to you. And again, if I've missed anything, please contact me.
Great. Thank you, Mehul. And just to back that up, we will, any questions we didn't get to, or some of these questions kind of got answered, but you needed further clarification, we will get to all of them and respond to you each individually. All right. So like we mentioned before, today's webinar will be made available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. We have all of our 18.1 launch sessions coming up this week, covering what's new across all of our product lines. And you can check them all out at devexpress.com/webinars and register today. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Mehul and to Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.